Welcome to the Library Show. Boy, do we have a terrific author today. As those of you who've been watching this year know, we have had authors all year long. And that's, in a sense, homage to One Book, One Lower Merion. Today, we have a Lower Merion-born author, Sam Apple. Sam has written a fascinating book. Really, so unusual, I really don't even know what box to put it in. It's really science writing of the highest order. Ravenous, brilliant, distinctive. Those are some adjectives I've read about it. The book is called Ravenous, and it's Otto Warburg, the Nazis, and the search. I want to get this right. And the search for the cancer-diet connection. Sam, welcome to the Library Show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. I think that the first thing to do is to describe who Otto Warburg was, because people will see the subtitle and say, who is this? And I know the last name sounds familiar, but this is not a name that I know.
Sure. Otto Warburg was a German scientist. He lived in the late 19th century and until 1970. And he was the son of a brilliant leading physicist, Emil Warburg, who worked with Einstein. So Otto Warburg grew up among many famous German scientists, Nobel laureates, and was sort of destined to do great things. And in 1923, he made this remarkable discovery about cancer, how cancer cells eat, which turned out to be, quite different from how a typical cell will eat. They take up lots of glucose, lots of blood sugar, and multiply. So this became a very famous discovery. But then he also made famous discoveries in how cells breathe and lots of other things. So he became one of the most important scientists of the 20th century. And one of the fascinating parts of his story, which a lot of my book is about, is his survival in Nazi Germany. Despite having a Jewish father, he stayed, and all the Jewish scientists around him left, and the Nazis actually protected him in the end. He got into some trouble for sure, but Hitler was terrified of cancer, and they thought he was on the path to a cure, so they protected him. And, it's a really unusual story in a lot of ways, but, there's sort of a surprising turn of events at the end where...
Don't tell us. No spoilers.
Okay.
Okay. But it sounds to me as if, in a way, there would have been three strikes here against Warburg. He was Jewish. He was openly gay, which was not a very usual thing in those days. But those two things did not condemn him to death. It was his research into cancer, which was something that Hitler was very frightened of. And I did not know that till I had read about your book.
Yeah, I should say that he wasn't openly gay per se. It's not something he talked about, but it was pretty clear to everybody who knew him. He lived with his male partner and they traveled together. So he certainly made no efforts to hide it, but it's not something that at that time, that was said out loud, for very political reasons. But it's, he should have, based on the circumstances of his life, he had as much to worry about as almost anybody in Nazi Germany. But the remarkable thing is not only did he stay, but he defied the Nazis again and again. When these brown shirts would come to his house, to his institute, he would chase them away and tell them to get off his property. So he was just extraordinarily bold and arrogant. But he wasn't a humanitarian really. He was incredibly arrogant. He just hated that anybody was trying to tell him what to do. So, he really provoked the Nazis, and if not for their fear of cancer, I really think that he would not have lasted very long.
Wow. What an unusual person he was. What made you decide to write this book, and how long did it take you to do all the research to put this together?
He was a very unusual person. That's part of the reason, I was attracted to this story. I like eccentrics and learning about their lives and what drives them. But I decided to write the book really because I was interested in metabolism and health and nutrition. And, I'd read a lot about sort of diabetes and heart disease and how they're related to our diets. But I never thought cancer was a part of that story. Cancer, I thought, was sort of a separate realm where, you get a mutation by, something in the environment or bad luck. So I started to learn that, that cancer actually is associated with diabetes and obesity and seems to be sort of tied up in all this metabolism stuff. But I only decided to write the book because, then I learned that Warburg had made this discovery, and I saw, well, now I have what I look for. And when I try to tell a science story, I have interesting science, and I have a great character, and that's when I knew I was going to write it. And it also, I'm Jewish, and I've written about Jewish themes, so it was natural for me to write about the Holocaust and to be able to tie that into, all the science I was interested in, made for a perfect project for me.
Okay. I think it's interesting. I neglected to mention that you teach science writing at Hopkins and you teach creative writing at Penn. And I think it's fascinating the sort of highways and byways that science writing takes you into. This is certainly one of the most interesting ones I've heard of. In terms of this book, have you heard from other scientists when the book started being talked about? Because it's really gotten a tremendous amount of positive comments well in advance of publication. And I think that's terrific. That doesn't happen with all science books. So kudos to you for that first. And has the reaction been very positive?
Yeah, so far it's been very positive. One thing, because I'm a journalist and an author and not a scientist, I tend to be pretty careful about, not trying to make my own claims about the science, but citing, scientists and people who are really experts in their respective fields, and making sure anything that I say reflects what they've already said or written. So far the responses have been good, but at the same time, there are always controversies in science, and I don't expect everybody to agree with it, and it's provocative in some ways. So we'll see, but so far so good.
As I was reading about this book, I thought about friends of mine who have had cancer, and to a person, they have all changed their diets, eating more vegetables, less meat, and that is something that clearly is being conveyed to them through their doctors and through their individual reading online. People really want to do what they can for themselves. So I think this book will have an impact. Let me come back to the book for a moment. I'm sure it took you a long time to do this. Did you spend time researching in Germany, or were you able to research this online? How did you get all this information about Warburg?
Yeah, I did. I traveled to Germany and went to various archives. And, I did a lot of online research. A lot of these archives will scan documents for you and then mail you the documents. So I didn't have to travel all over the world, but I did, online visit archives all over the world, and really, was very lucky. I felt that these archivists at various institutions are really generous with their time and help you dig up documents. So that was a huge help. But it was a struggle. I'm not fluent in German, and working through the German sources was really a challenge.
I was just about to ask, do you speak German? Because that could make it, if you don't, that made it, I imagine, a lot more difficult.
Yeah, that's part of the reason it took 5 years.
Well, I interviewed somebody and I said, how long did it take you to write this book? And they said 10 years. So writing a book is a pretty long-lasting project. It's not something that happens instantaneously. And I think for people who are thinking of making writing a career, it's good to have a sense of patience about it, to understand that it will take time.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the current state of research about cancer? I had read that when Warburg came out with his theory of the metabolic causes of this disease, that was brand new, and then that was overtaken by the idea that it was caused by genes. Where do things stand now in terms of, or maybe this is not even known fully yet, but in terms of an understanding of what the root causes of cancer are?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. There's been this sort of back and forth over the decades where, Warburg had popularized the idea that cancer is a problem with metabolism, with how our cells start to use energy in different ways. And then they discovered the structure of DNA in the 1950s, and that gradually took over cancer science. So everybody lost interest in metabolism, mostly focused on, mutations in the DNA and the new molecular biology, as they would call it. And, all the metabolism stuff disappeared. And now I think there's been, what I would call kind of a synthesis. Understanding that the metabolic changes lead to, genetic and what they call epigenetic changes, and then those in turn change metabolism again. But my own, and this might be controversial, but my own feeling is that you really want to talk about the core of it. It really does start with metabolism and diet. And how certain foods change the hormonal environment in the body, which in turn sort of changes how a cell uses energy, and then that sort of leads to a cascade of events, which I think results in cancer. But certainly, there are also genetic mutations along the way. You don't get to cancer without the mutations as well.
Sam, you used a very simple verb a few minutes ago. You said the cancer cells eat sugar. And I tend to think of cancer cells, unfortunately, growing, but I didn't think of them eating. I guess that is really what happens in the body, that there's just a kind of consumption of certain items, in this case, sugar, that makes the cells multiply and grow inside our bodies.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a very good question as well, because that's what it really comes down to, is the relationship between eating and growth. Cancer cells behave a lot like a single-celled organism. They just want to grow as much as they can. But if you think about a single-celled organism, little bacteria, what they do is they sort of sit there until they get food, and when they get food, they grow and grow and grow. So cancer cells behave a lot in that way. But we also have hormones in the body which sort of regulates how much they can eat. So I think the hormones are a big part of the story as well.
Wow. This is why I was an English major, not a science major, but this is really fascinating stuff. And I think that people who are undergoing treatment for cancer, and unfortunately I know several of them at the moment, really are told to adjust their diets pretty quickly in terms of what they can do for themselves. And so everything that you're doing, the research looking backwards, really looks forward to everybody who's handling this. Did I hear that there's some, well, I probably shouldn't say this, but this sounds like something that would be a great program on TV, that somebody would take your book and say, boy, this is a great series. And it could be a series about cancer. It could be a series about great scientists. Has there been any interest in that direction? I don't know.
Not yet, but
not yet. Okay, so we will keep our fingers crossed and hope that works out for you. And finally, I'm a former teacher, and I think it's fascinating that you teach writing, you teach science writing. When people come to you, do they have ideas that are already formed about the kind of writing that they plan to do, or the kind of topics they plan to pursue? Or do they tend to be more of a tabula rasa? They're a blank slate and they expect you to put in all that information?
Well, we brainstorm together. I teach different classes. So, the graduate students tend to have a little bit more preparation, the undergraduates less so. But I enjoy the brainstorming process. So it's fun for me when, I get to help in that respect.
Well, I think dealing with students as a teacher is really a fascinating process. Thank you so much for the book. Thanks for being on the show, and best of luck with this.
No, thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed. Take care and stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of The Library Show. Welcome back to The Library Show. As you know, our libraries are doing a fabulous job utilizing Zoom, Facebook, YouTube, everything that's out there to provide access to the libraries to you. And by the way, the libraries are open now too. June is a month full of activities. Wow. It is not easy to choose some activities to highlight. So what I'm doing this month is I'm highlighting one library, Belmont Hills Library, with Lizze Barrie, who is the head librarian there. Why Belmont Hills? Well, because Belmont Hills is doing activities for adults, for teens, and for young kids. Not that other libraries are not doing plenty of things also, but I like the variety. Let's be honest, I love books. That's why I'm doing this. Lizze, tell us what you're doing for adults, because I just love what Evan is doing, and I think that's worth focusing on first.
Yeah, well, Evan Wilson, one of our library assistants, has been over the pandemic tackling some of the longer books in the sort of classic literature canon, and doing weekly check-ins to tell you what's going on in the book. And so he's calling this series Evan Reads whatever book, so you don't have to. So you can just kind of do his little 20-minute bites of the novel at a time and get a sense of, all 800 pages or 900 pages of the book. He started out with War and Peace, and right now he's working on Les Mis, which is apparently, I did not know this, but it is one of the longest novels ever written in history. So
Wow. Well, no one can say he's not ambitious in terms of the books he's choosing. He's not choosing one of those skinny ones, but that's great. And the thing that I love is that this is a Friday night happening. So people can have Zoom meetings during the week. They can have Zoom business. They could do all kinds of things and then settle in on Friday night, as you said, with your mockini and your quarantini, and settle in and just enjoy having somebody read to you rather than read to your children or grandchildren. As an adult, what a treat. I don't know any time that anybody has read a book to me. Well, that's not true. We've had authors appear sometimes and they like to read their books, but this is a different thing entirely. So just tune in. Is there a specific time that that's on, Lizzie?
Each of the little recaps premieres at 8 o'clock on Friday nights. But if you miss it or if that's not convenient for you, you can always go back on our Facebook, and eventually I think all of War and Peace is uploaded to YouTube now too, and we'll be doing the same thing. So you can really do it at your convenience.
Okay, so it's a special time and it's also at your convenience, and they can get to that through going to the Belmont Hills website on the Lower Merion Library System.
Yes, 100%.
Okay. So just click. That's the idea. Okay, so we're not neglecting the kids because there are activities for teenagers too, or tweens. Are tweens the same as teens? I guess it is. Maybe not quite.
Tweens are like anybody that got up into the double digits, but they don't have teen at the end of the number yet.
Okay, so they could be 11 or 12.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, I got it. I just, as we used to call it junior high, as opposed to now where it's called middle school.
That's exactly it, yeah.
Okay, I used to say I was a junior high teacher, and people knew what that meant. Nowadays, people would say, what's junior high? I haven't heard of that. Okay, so there are things now for teens. So that's the 13 and up.
Yes, we are actually lucky enough. So Montgomery County every year for, I don't know, at least 10 years has been doing this amazing teen author tour. And usually it's a local-ish author. We've had some really amazing people. I remember when I was working at Leadington, we had A.S. King come, and she's really a prolific, like well-known YA writer, and she's from out in Berks County. But recently, in the past 2 summers, or so last summer and this summer, they have been, instead of having the author take 2 or 3 days and drive around to a bunch of different Montgomery County libraries to come in person and talk to people, again, doing everything over Zoom. But it's especially cool this year because we are having Jarrett Krasashka, and he is not that local, and he is really pretty famous. And so this is like a great opportunity, I think, that he's able to come and do this, whereas if everything was in person, I don't think this would be a possibility. So he is coming to do a Zoom with us, and he's actually doing one for the tweens and one for the teens because he has written a ton of books. He was a National Book Award finalist for his teen graphic novel, which is called Hey Kiddo, and I was looking for a copy of it this morning, but of course all of his books are checked out right now pretty much.
That speaks well for him. That's great.
Yes. So he will be doing that towards the end of June. And it's a really cool opportunity, and again, because it's on Zoom, like no one has to figure out how to get their parents to drive them over to the library or anything. They can just hop on and chat with him, which I think is a really great opportunity. I can't remember now if it's the day before or earlier that day that he's also going to be doing an event for the sort of younger kids, because he also wrote, in addition to that, he wrote 2 really popular series. I found one. So
Okay.
he's got, this might be backwards, I don't know.
No, I can read it. Jedi Academy, The Force
Yes, he's got,
Oversleeps. I like that.
yes, so he's got the Star Wars tie-in, the graphic novel sort of stuff. He's the author and illustrator, and then he also has a series called Lunch Ladies, which is kind of the adventures of a super lunch lady. So, yeah,
So
he's really
he uses
popular.
humor, it sounds like. I mean, just looking at the title and the art. There's a lot of humor in the
Yes.
books.
Yeah, I mean, his teen novel or graphic novel is not as funny. It's more of a autobiographical thing about sort of some of his struggles growing up, and finding himself as an artist, that like finding himself in art. But yeah, I mean, he's kind of all over the map. He's really got something to offer everybody, I think.
Okay, that sounds interesting. I was going to ask, what is his genre? Is it science fiction? Is it fantasy? Is it history? And it sounds like he does everything.
Yeah, I would say for the younger kids, it's leaning a little more sci-fi, and then that his teen graphic novel is really definitely like a realistic
Wow.
slice of life sort of thing.
As a former English teacher, it took me a while to get into the idea of graphic novels being actual novels. And Laurent Mondon, who's the director of youth services for the library system, was on this show some years ago. And he said, but we look at graphic novels as something on their own, as well as a pathway into reading regular novels.
Absolutely.
And I thought that was really interesting, because I now have a granddaughter who loves graphic novels. And she's at that tween stage. And I said, what are you reading? And she said, well, I'm reading this graphic novel and that. And I said, all right, she's reading. That's a plus. And it's great for getting Lower Merion tweens doing it. But let's see where we catch them younger. We also have things at the library that are for the elementary school age. What's going on in June for them?
Let's see. So I think we have been doing a lot of take-home craft kits. And so we are actually in June. It's kind of the launch of our summer reading program. And the theme this year for all of Lower Merion is Tales and Tales. So like animal tales, and then fairy tales, however you want to spell all those things. So I know that our children's librarian, Miss Gwen, has a take-home project set up for the younger kids. That's sort of a little science experiment, where you will take a little animal and you sort of make some sort of concoction that makes it resistant to water. So I haven't seen this in action, but it'll be the sort of thing where you sign up and then you come get your kit and you can pick it up at the library. And then Miss Gwen will premiere a Facebook video and a YouTube video showing you how to do the science experiment. So you can do it at home. You can do it as soon as the video pops up if you're really excited, or whenever's convenient for you again.
Well, I love that, particularly because I know there are some people who say, my kid is spending so many hours a day just looking at a screen, and this is looking at a screen and doing something with your hands and being active and creative and artsy craftsy. So I like that a lot. I hope the parents out there of that age kids enjoy it and appreciate it. I mean, they can still read books to their kids, but which I think is super important. But I love the idea of that. I have been given to understand that this summer, you mentioned science, that this summer, the Science in the Summer program, which has been sponsored by SmithKline for a number of years, is going to take place, and it's going to take place virtually, but people still have to pre-register. Is that right?
Yes. I believe it's in the similar vein. You would pre-register and then come to one of the pickup libraries, which I think we are one of them, and I hate to say I'm not
Ardmore
sure.
is one as well, I know.
Okay. And you will basically like pick up all of your equipment to do the science that they're going to walk you through during the program. So again, like register, then come to the library to get what you need. We will supply you with that, and then there will be stuff to watch and participate along with.
Well, I know that Science in the Summer has been a long-running, super successful, and even competitive program where people had to sign up early enough to get in.
Oh, yes.
And the beauty of Zoom is that everybody can get in. There's no issue about space in the classroom. which is great.
Yes, yes. And again, you don't have to, find a ride. You don't have to, if your parents are working, you don't have to figure out how to get to the library to come to the class. So
super. Well, it sounds like this is another wonderful month, a great beginning of summer. Thank you, Lizzie. Go to Belmont Hills, go to any of the other libraries in Lower Merion Library System this month, and have a great start to your summer. Thanks for tuning in to the Library Show. Bye.